They weren't soldier, they weren't executives. And yet without them, Shinra would have collapsed long before a certain flower girl met a guy with a big sword. The Turks didn't just support the system, they were the system, moving in silence, cleaning up messes, and disappearing threats. When people talk about Final Fantasy VII's most important players, the Turks are rarely mentioned. But make no mistake, the Turks are bigger and deadlier than you realize. They wear suits instead of armor, trade broadswords for batons and katanas, and joke around like they don't even take any of this seriously. But behind the sarcasm, behind the sunglasses, is a deadly and efficient machine. One of Shinra's most crucial tools of control. They don't win battles by brute strength. They win by knowing where you sleep. The Turks operate in shadows, they recruit, they spy, they kill. And they do all that with an unflinching calm that makes them more terrifying than most cackling villains. But to understand the Turks, we have to go back to the Genesis War. The Genesis War was a shadow conflict, a mutiny within Shinra's elite. Genesis Rhapsodus, one of the original members of Soldier First Class, went rogue, taking with him scores of clone soldiers and unleashing chaos across the world looking for a cure for his degrading body. But what began as a personal vendetta spiraled into something much larger, a war over identity, legacy, and the future of Shinra's military might. Soldiers infused with Genova cells and Mako energy were unstable by nature. Genesis's, it's a funny word, rebellion was just the tip of the iceberg. Deep beneath Midgar, Shinra scrambled to keep control, and in the chaos, it wasn't just Zack Fair or Sephiroth making headlines. It was the Turks who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, recruiting, blackmailing, eliminating deserters, and destroying evidence of Shinra's bioengineering experiments. And before Crisis, a mobile game rarely experienced outside of Japan, we see this role in full detail. The Turks are hunting down Avalanche cells and thwarting their plans to attack Shinra facilities and personnel. They were not just assassins. They were the firewall between Shinra's empire and the world. Before Crisis peeled back the curtain on the forgotten years of their legacy, before Cloud ever met Aerith, and what it reveals is a Black Ops division at the height of its cold efficiency, operating not just in the shadows, but as the shadows. This wasn't the tidy four-person squad we met in Final Fantasy VII. No, this was an era when the Turks were numerous, anonymous operatives working under code names, each trained to be the last face a target ever sees. Their mission? Neutralize threats to Shinra before they become a problem. This included political dissidents, scientists with second thoughts, and even ex-soldiers. But their most significant threat, the one that would test their loyalty and haunt their future, was an insurrection brewing from within. Avalanche. Not the ragtag eco-terrorists we remember. This version of Avalanche was a militarized force, backed by Wu Tai and ideologically driven by a woman named Alpha, or just Elf, whose past was as twisted into Shinra's legacy as the Turks' own. The war that played out between Avalanche and the Turks and before Crisis wasn't really about good versus evil. It was about control, manipulation, and the human cost of power. And the Turks, they weren't heroes, but they weren't exactly villains either. They were necessary. They were the unsung agents who kept the gears of Midgar turning at any cost. These wars and conflicts left scars on everyone involved. It solidified Shinra's paranoia, it deepened their dependence on the Turks, and laid the groundwork for Sephiroth's own downfall. The Genesis War and the Avalanche insurgency was, in essence, a prologue to Final Fantasy VII. And the Turks were the uncredited catalysts. By the time 7 begins, the players don't even realize how much the Turks have laid the groundwork for their favorite JRPG. In a game about identity, corporate decay, and ecological collapse, the Turks are the janitors of the underworld, cleaning up the mess Shinra doesn't want the public to see. Where soldiers are the poster boys, the Turks are the ones that do what soldiers won't: assassinations, kidnappings, covert surveillance, human experimentation logistics. They're not killers necessarily because they enjoy it. They're killers because someone has to be. It has to be someone's job. When you meet them early, chasing Aerith and recruiting children for Shinra's experiments, it's easy to dismiss them as stylish goons. Reno's lazy, Rude is silent, Elena is new, and Song is actually kind of polite. But their lethality is never in question. Every time they appear, someone dies or disappears. They burn Sector 7 to the ground, drop a plate on thousands of innocents, because it was the mission. No hesitation, no melodrama, purely execution. Again, they're not evil per se. That's what makes them kind of terrifying. They're the utmost professionals. In many ways, the Turks are a warped reflection of Avalanche. Both groups fight for what they believe in, both operate in the shadows, and both question the machine. But while Avalanche wages war against Shinra, the Turks endure it. They stay and obey. Because to them, loyalty is everything. Song, who's known Aerith since childhood, still follows the orders to bring her in, even though it's obvious he does care for her somewhat. I mean, he's known her since she was a child. Even Reno and Rude show some level of affection towards Aerith, but they always pull the trigger when it's time. There's this unspoken tragedy to them. They don't rebel. They just perhaps live with the guilt. And when Shinra falls, when the president dies, the Turks remain under Rufus's leadership. Shinra's gone, but the Turks are still working, still operating, because even after the apocalypse, someone needs to clean up. And that brings us to Advent Children, where most characters are drifting, lost in memory, trauma, and haze. The Turks are still moving forward. Rufus Shinra is wounded and half dead, but who's by his side? Not soldiers, not executives. It's the Turks, still guarding him, still fighting off threats with broken bones and shattered ribs. Reno and Rude in particular shine here not as punchlines, but as warriors. They take on Yazoo and Law's remnants of Sephiroth himself. And even when they're outclassed, they don't back down. Not because they think they'll win, but because it's the job. Their survival is no accident. It's a statement. The world changes, Shinra falls, the heroes retire, but the Turks, they adapt. They endure. You don't beat Sephiroth without the Turks. You don't stop Meteor. You don't even have a plot without them. They track Aerith and trigger her journey. They drop the plate, sparking Avalanche's rise. They're the reason Rufus lives, and in Advent Children, they look to build a brighter future. And before Crisis Core, Advent Children, they are always there, watching, moving, silently guiding the shape of events. They're not side characters. They're the shadow cast by the story itself. And like all good shadows, they only become more visible once you start looking for them. The Turks are funny, yes. Stylish, even more so. They're a fan favorite group, and for good reason. But that surface level charm hides something much deeper. These aren't just goons with cool hair. They're killers with conviction. Agents of quiet devastation. Morally gray antagonists. Or good guys, depending on the day. And in a world of fallen heroes, and fading memories, the Turks are one of the last and only constants. The truth is, the Turks aren't secondary. They are the spine of Final Fantasy VII's world and story from beginning to end. Alright, you guys, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing, and check out the Final Fantasy lore playlist. I also have a Chrono playlist that's filling up, and a teeny tiny Suikoden playlist that I will be adding to at some point. I appreciate you all watching. What do you think about the Turks? Who's your favorite Turk? When I was little and playing Final Fantasy VII, they just seemed like these goofy bad guy types. But as the lore for Final Fantasy VII expanded and you got movies and prequels and spin-offs, you really learn just how important and how integral they are to the story of everything that has to do with Final Fantasy VII. Let me know if you agree in the comments. I appreciate you all. Have an amazing day, and God bless.